The unexpected stop. Chloe Parker wiped down the last table at Theo's Mountain Diner as the afternoon sun began to fade behind the Colorado peaks. At 26, she had been working at this small roadside restaurant for 3 years, ever since she had moved back home to care for her sick grandmother. The diner sat along a winding mountain highway that connected Denver to the smaller mountain communities. Catching travelers who needed a meal and a warm smile, thunder rumbled in the distance. As dark clouds gathered over the mountains, Chloe glanced out the window, knowing that mountain storms could be fierce and unpredictable. She had grown up in this town of barely 800 people, where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at the pace of the changing seasons. "Storm's coming in fast tonight," said Theodore Mitchell, the 70-year-old owner of the diner. Everyone called him Theo, and he had been like a grandfather to Chloe since her own family had faced hard times. His weathered hands moved expertly as he cleaned the old coffee machine that had been serving travelers for decades. "Should I stay late in case anyone needs shelter?" Chloe asked, tying her auburn hair back with a rubber band. Her green eyes showed the kindness that made every customer feel welcome, even the grumpy truckers who sometimes stopped by. "That's why you're special, girl," Theo smiled, his eyes crinkling. "Always thinking about others. But you've got classes tomorrow at the community college. I can handle any stragglers." Chloe was studying business management through night classes, dreaming of someday opening her own small restaurant. It seemed like an impossible dream on her waitress salary, but she refused to give up hope. Her father had taught her that honest work and determination could overcome any obstacle. Before he had lost everything to a business partner who had betrayed his trust. The bell above the diner door chimed, and both Chloe and Theo looked up in surprise. It was almost closing time, and the approaching storm usually kept people off the mountain roads. A man in an expensive dark suit stepped inside, shaking rain from his black hair. He looked completely out of place in their humble diner, like a peacock that had wandered into a chicken coop. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "My car broke down about a mile back. The engine just died, and my phone has no signal up here." Chloe studied the newcomer. He was tall and handsome in that polished way that spoke of wealth and privilege. Suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. His dark eyes scanned the diner with barely concealed disdain, as if he were calculating how quickly he could escape this place. "Car trouble's common on these mountain roads," Theo said friendly, wiping his hands on his apron, "especially when a storm's brewing. I'm Theodore Mitchell, but everyone calls me Theo. This is Chloe." The man hesitated for a moment, as if debating whether to give his real name. "James Richmond," he finally said. "I was driving to Aspen for a business meeting, but I suppose that's not happening tonight." Chloe nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding. James Richmond was one of the most famous tech billionaires in America. She had seen his face on magazine covers and news programs. Richmond Industries was worth billions, and he was known for his ruthless business practices and his string of relationships with supermodels and actresses. "Well, Mr. Richmond," Theo said, apparently unaware of who their customer was, "you're welcome to wait here until the storm passes. Can I get you some coffee and a slice of pie? Chloe makes the best apple pie in Colorado." James looked around the diner again, taking in the worn vinyl booths, the faded photographs of local landmarks, and the handwritten menu board. Everything about his expression said he would rather be anywhere else. "Just coffee," he said, sliding into the booth nearest the door. Chloe poured the coffee, her hands steady despite her nervousness. She had served plenty of wealthy tourists over the years, but never someone this famous. "Cream or sugar, Mr. Richmond?" "Black," he replied without looking up from his phone, which he was shaking in frustration. "How is there no cell coverage in this place?" "It's 2024, not 1924. The mountains block most signals," Chloe explained. "There's a landline you can use if you need to make an important call." James looked at her as if she had suggested he communicate by smoke signals. A landline. "Do people still use those?" Theo chuckled from behind the counter. "Son, up here we make do with what works. Technology's fine, but it doesn't help much when Mother Nature decides to flex her muscles." As if to emphasize Theo's point, lightning flashed outside the windows, followed by a crack of thunder that made the diner's old buildings shudder. Rain began pelting the windows harder, and the wind picked up. Howling around the corners of the building, James stared out at the storm, his jaw tightening. I have a conference call in 2 hours with investors in Tokyo. This deal is worth $200 million. Well, Theo said philosophically, I reckon those investors will understand if you explain about the storm. The money's important, but staying alive is more important. James looked at the old man as if he had spoken in a foreign language. In his world, missing a call with investors was unthinkable. Deals were won or lost in moments, and showing weakness could cost millions. Chloe refilled his coffee cup, studying his tense expression. Despite his arrogance, she could see the stress lines around his eyes. Whatever business he was involved in, it was clearly putting enormous pressure on him. The storm should pass by morning, she said gently. Theo has a small room upstairs if you need a place to stay. It's not fancy, but it's clean and warm. James's phone buzzed and he grabbed it eagerly. Finally, a signal. He answered quickly. Benjamin. Thank God. Yes, I'm stuck in some mountain town. The car died. Chloe moved away to give him privacy, but she couldn't help overhearing parts of the conversation as she cleaned nearby tables. The man on the other end, Benjamin, seemed to be James's business partner. The Meridian merger documents are ready, James was saying. I'll review everything tomorrow when I get back. You've double-checked all the financial projections? There was a pause. Good. This acquisition will make us the dominant player in the market. Something in his tone made Chloe glance over. James's face had changed. The stress lines had deepened, and he was gripping the phone tighter than necessary. What do you mean there might be complications? James's voice dropped lower, but Chloe could still hear him. Benjamin, this deal has to go through. I've invested everything in this expansion. If it falls apart... He trailed off, running his free hand through his hair. Chloe felt a flutter of sympathy. Despite his wealth and arrogance, James Richmond looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. She had seen that same expression on her father's face years ago, when his business partner had been making promises while secretly planning to betray him. The call ended, and James stared at his phone with a worried expression. He seemed to have forgotten where he was, lost in thoughts of business deals and financial projections. Everything all right, son? Theo asked, his voice gentle. James startled, as if remembering he wasn't alone. Fine, just business. He took a long sip of coffee. His expression guarded again. Thunder crashed overhead and the lights in the diner flickered. Through the windows, they could see tree branches bending in the wind and sheets of rain washing across the parking lot. That settles it, Theo declared. Nobody's driving anywhere tonight. Mr. Richmond, you're welcome to the upstairs room. Got a bed, a small table, and a lamp. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you dry. James looked out at the storm, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. What do I owe you? $20 for the room, and dinner's on the house, Theo said. Chloe, why don't you fix our guest a proper meal? He looks like he hasn't eaten today. Despite James's protests that he wasn't hungry, Chloe prepared a plate of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. She had learned to read people during her years at the diner. She could see past his expensive clothes to the exhausted man underneath as she set the plate in front of him. Their eyes met for a moment. Up close, she could see that his dark eyes held intelligence and determination, but also something else. Loneliness, perhaps. Or fear. Thank you, James said, and for the first time. His voice sounded genuinely grateful rather than entitled. While James ate, Chloe finished her closing duties. She found herself stealing glances at him, curious about the man behind the billionaire reputation. The business call had clearly troubled him. She wondered what kind of complications could worry someone with his resources. Chloe's got good instincts about people, Theo said, apparently noticing her interest. Been that way since she was little. She can spot trouble coming before most folks even know there's a problem. James looked up from his meal. What kind of trouble? All kinds, Theo replied. Remember that smooth-talking salesman who tried to sell me that fancy new grill system? Chloe took one look at him and told me he was lying about something. Turned out the whole company was a scam. James's fork paused halfway to his mouth. How could she tell? Body language, Chloe said, feeling her cheeks warm. People's faces change when they're not telling the truth. They get this tight look around their eyes, and they avoid direct eye contact. My grandmother taught me to watch for those signs. Interesting, James murmured, studying her face. And what do you see when you look at me? Chloe hesitated, then decided to be honest. I see someone who's scared, not of the storm, but of something else. Something that's been eating at you. For a while, James set down his fork, his expression suddenly guarded. You're very observant for a waitress. The comment stung, but Chloe kept her voice level. Being a waitress doesn't mean being stupid, Mr. Richmond. We just have different kinds of education. For a moment, James looked ashamed. I apologize. That was rude. Thunder rumbled overhead again, and the lights flickered more dramatically this time. Theo began shutting down the kitchen equipment, preparing to close for the night. I should show you to your room, Chloe offered. She led James through a narrow door behind the counter and up a steep staircase to the small apartment above the diner. The room was simple but clean, with a single bed, a wooden desk, and a window that looked out over the mountain valley. Bathrooms down the hall, Chloe explained. There are extra blankets in the closet if you get cold. Mountain nights can be chilly even in summer. James nodded, looking around the modest room. I haven't stayed anywhere this simple since I was a kid. Sometimes simple is better, Chloe said softly. It helps you remember what's really important. As she turned to leave, James spoke again. Chloe, that thing you said about reading people? If someone you trusted was lying to you about something important, would you be able to tell? She turned back, surprised by the vulnerability in his question. I think so. Why? James was quiet for a long moment, staring out the rain-streaked window. No reason, just curious. But Chloe could see there was much more to it than curiosity. Whatever was troubling James Richmond went deeper than business stress. Someone in his life was causing him to doubt everything he thought he knew. As she made her way back downstairs, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that James's arrival wasn't just coincidence. The storm had brought him here for a reason, and somehow she was meant to help him. She had learned to trust those instincts, even when they led her into situations that seemed impossible. Outside, the storm raged on, trapping the billionaire and the waitress together in the small mountain diner. Neither of them knew that by morning, both of their lives would be forever changed by the truth that was about to unfold. The warning that would save everything was still hours away. But the foundation for trust was already being laid between two people from completely different worlds. Sometimes the most important meetings happen when we least expect them, in the most unlikely places. During the storms that force us to stop running and start listening to what our hearts are trying to tell us, James Richmond had built an empire. But he was about to discover that the most valuable thing he would ever find couldn't be bought with money. And Chloe Parker, who had never traveled more than 50 miles from her hometown, was about to embark on the adventure of her lifetime by simply doing what she had always done, caring about a stranger who needed help. The morning after the storm, Chloe arrived at the diner before dawn, as she always did. The storm had passed, leaving the mountain air crisp and clean. Puddles reflected the early morning sky, and broken branches littered the parking lot. She unlocked the back door and began her morning routine, starting the coffee and preparing. For another day of serving travelers along the mountain highway, she had barely slept. Her mind replaying the conversations with James Richmond. Something about his phone call with Benjamin had bothered her all night. Tension in his voice, the way his hands had shaken slightly when he mentioned complications with the merger. Her instincts were telling her that James was walking into some kind of trap, but she had no proof. Only the nagging feeling that had kept her awake. Theo arrived an hour later, whistling softly as he entered through the back door. Morning, sunshine, how's our famous guest? Still sleeping, I think, Chloe replied, mixing batter for pancakes. Theo, do you think people can sense when they're being betrayed, even if they don't want to admit it? The old man paused in hanging up his jacket, giving her a thoughtful look. That's a heavy question for this early in the morning. You thinking about your daddy again? Chloe nodded. Her father had trusted his business partner completely, ignoring all the warning signs until it was too late. The betrayal had cost him everything, including his health. He had died 3 years later, worn down by stress and regret. Sometimes people see what they want to see, Theo said gently, especially when it comes to folks they care about. Your daddy was a good man, but he wanted to believe the best in everyone. Sometimes that's a weakness as much as a strength. Before Chloe could respond, she heard a car pulling into the parking lot. Through the window, she saw an expensive black sedan with tinted windows. It was barely 7 in the morning, too early for most travelers. Two people got out of the car. The first was a well-dressed man in his 40s with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to power. The second person made Chloe's breath catch in her throat. It was a stunning woman with platinum blonde hair, wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than Chloe made in 6 months. Expecting company? Theo asked, noticing her expression. I don't think so, Chloe murmured, but something told her these visitors were connected to James Richmond. The couple entered the diner, the man's eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. The woman wrinkled her nose slightly at the humble surroundings, as if the very air offended her sensibilities. Good morning, Theo said cheerfully. You folks are up early? Coffee. The man ignored the greeting, his attention focused entirely on his surroundings. We're looking for someone. A man who was stranded here last night. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. His name is James Richmond. Chloe felt her pulse quicken. These people knew James, but something about them made her skin crawl. The man's smile never reached his eyes, and the woman's beauty had a hardness too, it that spoke of cruelty beneath the surface. And you are? Theo asked, his friendly demeanor becoming more cautious. Benjamin Westbrook, the man replied smoothly. I'm Mr. Richmond's business partner. This is Amanda Foster, his fiancée. We've been worried sick about him. Chloe nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding fiancé. James hadn't mentioned being engaged, though that didn't necessarily mean anything. Rich men often had complicated personal lives. He's upstairs, Theo said. Room's right above us. I'm sure he'll be glad to see friendly faces. But is Benjamin? And Amanda exchanged a quick glance. Chloe caught something that made her blood run cold. It was the same look her father's business partner had given his secretary the day before everything fell apart. A look that said they were sharing a secret, and that secret involved hurting someone. Actually, Benjamin said, his voice taking on a more urgent tone, we need to discuss some business matters privately before we see James. Is there somewhere we could talk? It's about the merger he's been working on. Theo gestured toward the small office behind the counter. You can use my office if you need privacy. As the couple moved toward the back room, Chloe made a quick decision. She grabbed a dish rag and began wiping down tables, working her way closer to the office door. Years of waitressing had taught her how to move quietly and blend into the background. Through the partially open door, she could hear their conversation clearly. This is perfect, Amanda was saying, her voice dropping its earlier sweetness. James. Stuck in this backwoods place gives us exactly the opportunity we need. The timing couldn't be better, Benjamin agreed. The merger documents are ready, and all the financial projections have been altered. When James signs tomorrow, he'll think he's acquiring Meridian Corporation for $200 million. In reality, he'll be buying a shell company with massive hidden debts. Chloe pressed closer to the door, her heart pounding. This was exactly what she had feared. How much will he lose? Amanda asked, and there was anticipation in her voice that made Chloe feel sick. Everything, Benjamin replied with satisfaction. Richmond Industries will be bankrupted within 6 months. The company will have to be sold to cover the debts, and I've already arranged to buy it through a subsidiary for a fraction of its value. And James will be ruined, completely and utterly ruined. After 30 years of friendship, he still has no idea what's coming. Amanda laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The great James Richmond, brought down by the two people he trusts most. It's almost poetic. Chloe backed away from the door, her mind reeling. This wasn't just business betrayal. This was personal destruction planned by people who claimed to love James, Benjamin, his childhood friend and business partner, Amanda, supposedly his fiancée. Both of them plotting to destroy him completely. Did you plant the false financial reports in his files? Amanda asked. Last week, Benjamin confirmed. He's been reviewing doctored numbers for days, completely unaware that every projection is designed to mislead him. He thinks this merger will make him the dominant player in the tech industry. Instead, it will destroy everything he's built. What about the other board members? Won't they question the deal? I've been feeding them the same false information. They trust my analysis completely. Besides, James is final approval authority. Once he signs, it's done. Chloe felt tears of anger and frustration burning her eyes. Upstairs, James Richmond was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the two people he trusted most were planning his complete destruction. She had to warn him, but who would believe? A small-town waitress over his business partner and fiancé? We should go wake him, Amanda said. Play the part of concerned loved ones. Maybe suggest he sign the documents today, given how eager he is to close the deal. Brilliant, Benjamin agreed. His car is still broken down, so we can offer him a ride back to Denver. By evening, he'll have signed his own financial death warrant. As their footsteps approached the office door, Chloe quickly moved back to the counter, pretending to organize the coffee supplies. Her hands were shaking as she tried to process what she had learned. Benjamin and Amanda emerged from the office, their expressions once again composed and friendly. Thank you for the privacy, Benjamin told Theo. We'll just go collect James and head back to the city. I'll wake him, Chloe said quickly, surprising herself with her boldness. The stairs are steep and I know which boards creak. Wouldn't want to startle him. Benjamin's eyes narrowed slightly, as if sensing something, but he nodded. That's thoughtful of you. Chloe climbed the narrow staircase, her mind racing. How could she warn James without sounding like a crazy person? Believe that his closest friends were his worst enemies? She knocked softly on his door. Mr. Richmond, you have visitors. James opened the door, looking more rested than he had the night before. He had changed into casual clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt that made him look younger and more approachable. Visitors. Your business partner, Benjamin Westbrook, and your fiancée, Amanda Foster, Chloe said, watching his face carefully. James's expression shifted, and Chloe caught a flicker of something. Confusion, perhaps her doubt. Amanda's here? Would they find me? GPS tracking on your phone, I suppose, Chloe said. Mr. Richmond, can I ask you something? Of course. And Chloe took a deep breath. Last night you asked me about reading people, about whether I could tell if someone was lying. I need you to promise me something. James tilted his head, studying her face. What? Promise me that when you see them, you'll really look at them. Not with your heart, but with your eyes. Watch their faces when they talk about your business deal. Promise me you'll trust what you see, not what you want to believe. Shh, shh. James was quiet for a long moment. Chloe, what aren't you telling me? Oh, before she could answer, Benjamin's voice called up the stairs. James, are you all right up there? Coming, James called back. He looked at Chloe one more time. Promise I'll pay attention. As they walked downstairs together, Chloe silently prayed that James's survival instincts were stronger than his loyalty to old friends. The conversation she had overheard proved that Benjamin and Amanda were capable of destroying him without a second thought. James. Amanda rushed forward as they entered the main dining area, throwing her arms around him in what appeared to be a loving embrace. But Chloe noticed that Amanda's eyes remained cold and calculating over James's shoulder. I was so worried when Benjamin told me about your car trouble, Amanda continued, her voice dripping with concern. Are you hurt? Did you spend the night in this place? I'm fine, James replied, but Chloe could see him studying Amanda's face. The people here took good care of me. I'm sure they did their best, Amanda said with barely concealed condescension. But you must be eager to get back to civilization. We have so much to discuss about the merger. Benjamin stepped forward, clasping James on the shoulder. Meridian deal is moving faster than expected. I think we should finalize everything today while the momentum is strong. Chloe watched James's face as Benjamin spoke. She saw his eyes narrow slightly. Noticed the way his jaw tightened when Benjamin mentioned the merger timeline today? James asked. That's unusually fast for a deal this size. Sometimes you have to strike while the iron is hot, Benjamin replied smoothly. I've reviewed all the financial projections again. This acquisition will increase our market share by 300% within the first year. There it was. Chloe saw James's expression change as he processed Benjamin's words. The same look she had seen on her father's face when he first began to suspect his partner's lies. It was the moment when trust began to crack, replaced by the cold light of suspicion. 300%? James repeated quietly. Oh, that seems optimistic. The numbers don't lie, Benjamin said, but his smile was becoming forced. Amanda, why don't you tell James how excited you are about our future together once this deal closes? Amanda moved closer to James, running her hand along his arm. We'll finally have everything we've dreamed of, darling. The merger will secure our position for generations. But James stepped back slightly, and Chloe could see that he was beginning to notice things. The way Amanda's touch felt calculated, rather than loving, the way Benjamin's explanations sounded rehearsed rather than spontaneous. I'd like to review the documents myself before signing anything, James said carefully. A flash of irritation crossed Benjamin's face before he could control it. Of course, but we shouldn't delay too long. Meridian's board is expecting our answer by noon. James nodded, but Chloe could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was beginning to question everything, just as she had hoped. Let me settle up. Here, and we can go, James said. He walked to the counter where Theo was pretending to read a newspaper, while obviously listening to every word. What do I owe you? James asked. Nothing at all, Theo replied. It was our pleasure to help a traveler in need. James pulled out his wallet anyway, placing several $100 bills on the counter. For your kindness and for the room. As he turned to leave, he caught Chloe's eye one more time. She saw gratitude there, but also something else. Recognition that she had tried to warn him about something important. Thank you, Chloe, he said quietly. For everything. Be careful, Mr. Richmond, she replied, hoping he understood that. She meant more than just driving safely. As the black sedan pulled out of the parking lot, Chloe stood at the window watching it disappear down the mountain road. She had done what she could to plant seeds of doubt in James's mind, but now he was alone with two people who wanted to destroy him. You did the right thing, Theo said, joining her at the window. I hope it was enough, Chloe whispered. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear thunder rumbling again. Another storm was coming, and this one would determine whether James Richmond survived the betrayal that was waiting for him in the city below. The warning had been given. But the real battle was just beginning. The race to save a life, 3 hours after the black sedan had disappeared down the mountain road. Chloe was still restless. She moved through her duties at the diner like someone in a dream, constantly glancing at the phone and wondering if she should call someone. But who would believe her story about overhearing a conspiracy between a billionaire's business partner and fiancé? You're wearing a hole in that floor, Theo observed, watching her pace between the counter and the windows. What's eating at you, girl? Now Chloe stopped and faced the old man who had become like a grandfather to her. Theo, what would you do if you knew someone was about to be hurt, but you had no way to prove it and no way to stop it? Theo set down the glass he was cleaning and gave her his full attention. That depends. How sure are you about this feeling? As sure as I was about Daddy's partner, Chloe whispered. The comparison made her stomach clench with fear and regret. Then you already know what you have to do, Theo said gently. The question is whether you're brave enough to do it. Before Chloe could respond, the phone behind the counter rang. She answered it absently, expecting a call about supplies or reservations. Instead, a frantic male voice filled her ear. Is this the Mountain Diner? The place where James Richmond stayed last night? Yes, Chloe said, her pulse quickening. Who is this? My name's David Kim. I work for Richmond Industries. I have been trying to reach Mr. Richmond all morning, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. I have urgent information about the Meridian merger. Chloe gripped the phone tighter. What kind of information? Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but if you have any way to contact Mr. Richmond, you need to tell him not to sign anything today. Our forensic accounting team discovered massive discrepancies in the Meridian financial reports. The company is hiding debts that could bankrupt anyone who acquires them. Chloe's heart started racing. This was the proof she needed. Mr. Kim, are you saying the merger is a trap? It's worse than that, David replied, his voice shaking with urgency. We also found evidence that someone inside Richmond Industries has been feeding false information to Mr. Richmond for weeks. Someone with high-level access to all his files and communications. Benjamin Westbrook, Chloe whispered. There was silence on the other end of the line. How did you know that name? Chloe took a deep breath and made a decision that would change her life forever. Mr. Kim, I need you to listen carefully. Mr. Richmond is in immediate danger, and we may be the only people who can save him. She quickly explained everything she had overheard, Benjamin and Amanda's conspiracy, their plan to complete the signing that very day, and James's growing suspicions. David listened without interruption, and when she finished, he let out a low whistle. Miss Parker, you may have just saved one of America's most innovative companies from destruction, but we have a problem. The signing ceremony is scheduled for 2 o'clock at Richmond Industries. Headquarters in Denver, that's less than 3 hours from now. Chloe looked out the window at the mountain road that wound down toward the city. How long would it take to drive there? From your location? At least 2.5 hours, assuming perfect conditions? The math was simple and terrifying. Even if she left immediately, she would barely make it in time. And that assumed her old pickup truck could handle the mountain roads at high speed without breaking down. Mr. Kim, can you get into the building? Can you stop the signing? Security won't let me near the executive floor without Mr. Richmond's authorization, and he's not answering his phone. They've probably confiscated it to prevent any outside interference. Chloe closed her eyes, thinking quickly. What if someone else showed up? Someone they wouldn't expect. Like who? Like the small-town waitress who spent the night talking with James Richmond about trust and loyalty. Theo, who had been listening to her side of the conversation, stepped forward. Chloe, that's a 2-hour drive down dangerous mountain roads. Your truck barely made it up here last week. Then I'll have to pray it holds together for one more trip, Chloe said, already reaching for her keys. She turned back to the phone. Mr. Kim, meet me in the lobby of Richmond Industries at 1:45. I'll need you to help me get to James before he signs those papers. Miss Parker, you don't understand. This isn't just about stopping a bad business deal. Benjamin Westbrook has been planning this for years. If he realizes we're onto him, he'll move to protect himself. That could mean destroying evidence, eliminating witnesses, or worse. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance, Chloe replied, her voice steadier than she felt. After hanging up, she turned to Theo, who was watching her with a mixture of pride and concern. I have to go. I know you do, the old man said. But Chloe, these people have money and power. They won't hesitate to hurt you if you get in their way. Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to get in their way, Chloe replied, grabbing her jacket. I'm planning to run right through them. Theo smiled and pulled a set of keys from his pocket. Take my truck. It's got a better engine and 4-wheel. Drive. You'll need both to make it down that mountain safely. Chloe hugged the old man tightly. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just a paranoid waitress who's about to make a fool of herself in front of some of the most powerful people in Colorado? Then at least you'll be a fool with a clear conscience, Theo replied. But honey, you're not wrong. I've seen that look in your eyes before, and you're never wrong when you get that look. 15 minutes later, Chloe was racing down the winding mountain highway in Theo's pickup truck, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she navigated the sharp curves and steep grades. The truck's engine was more powerful than her own vehicle, but the mountain roads were treacherous, and she had to balance speed with safety. As she drove, her mind kept returning to the moment she had met James Richmond. He had seemed so arrogant and entitled, dismissive of her simple life and small-town values. But underneath that polished exterior, she had sensed something else: loneliness, vulnerability. A man who had built walls around himself because he had been hurt before. Her phone, sitting in the passenger seat, rang several times. Each time she glanced at the caller ID and saw David Kim's number. Finally, on a straight stretch of highway, she answered. Miss Parker, where are you? About an hour outside Denver, she replied, pressing the accelerator harder. What's happening there? I've been monitoring the situation from outside the building. The signing ceremony has been moved up to 1:30. They're trying to rush it through before anyone can interfere. Chloe's heart sank. Moving up the timeline meant she would arrive too late, even driving at dangerous speeds. Can you delay them somehow? I'm trying, but I'm just a mid-level employee. They won't listen to me without proof. What about the forensic accounting report? Isn't that proof enough? Not without Mr. Richmond seeing it personally, and he's been isolated since he arrived at the building. No outside phone calls, no visitors, except Benjamin and Amanda. Chloe thought quickly, trying to remember everything James had told her about his business. David, who else at the company would have authority to stop a merger? Board of directors. But they're all attending the signing ceremony. They trust Benjamin's analysis completely. What about legal counsel? Surely the company has lawyers who review major acquisitions? There was a pause. Actually, yes. Margaret Chen, the chief legal officer. She's been with the company for 15 years, and she reports directly to Mr. Richmond, not to Benjamin. Can you reach her? I can try, but she'll want to see the evidence in person. And she's probably already in the conference room preparing for the signing. Chloe made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. David, call Margaret Chen and tell her that James Richmond's life depends on her reviewing the forensic accounting report before he signs anything. Tell her a witness to Benjamin's conspiracy is racing to Denver to provide testimony, but she needs to delay the signing until I get there. Miss Parker, are you sure about this? Once we make these accusations public, there's no going back. If we're wrong, we're not wrong, Chloe interrupted, remembering the cold satisfaction in Benjamin's voice as he planned James's destruction. David, I heard them planning this. I heard Amanda laugh about destroying the man she claims to love. These people are capable of anything? Understood. I'll contact Margaret Chen immediately. As Chloe hung up the phone, she saw the Denver skyline appearing in the distance. The city sprawled across the horizon, a maze of glass and steel towers. That seemed to mock her small-town origins. Richmond Industries headquarters was the tallest building in the business district, its silver facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. She had never felt more out of place in her life, but she had never been more certain of her purpose. Somewhere in that towering symbol of corporate power, James Richmond was about to sign documents that would destroy everything he had worked for. And the only people who could save him were a forensic accountant he barely knew and a waitress from a mountain diner who had learned to read the truth in people's faces. The final confrontation was minutes away, and Chloe knew that, by the end of the day, either James would be free from the betrayal that threatened him, or she would have failed someone else the way she had failed her father. This time, she promised herself, she would not be too late. As she pulled into the parking garage of Richmond Industries, Chloe whispered a prayer for courage and wisdom. The next hour would determine whether love and loyalty were stronger than greed and deception, whether a simple truth spoken by an honest heart could overcome years of carefully planned lies. The elevator that would carry her to the executive floor was waiting, its polished doors reflecting back the image of a young woman who had traveled far from her comfort zone to save a man she barely knew. But as the doors closed and the elevator began its ascent, Chloe realized that she wasn't trying to save a stranger anymore. Somehow, in the space of a single stormy night, James Richmond had become someone worth fighting for, and she was about to discover whether he felt the same way about her. The confrontation that changed everything. The Richmond Industries conference room occupied the entire top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of Denver and the Rocky Mountains beyond. It was a room designed to intimidate, to remind everyone who entered of the power and wealth of the man whose name was on the building. James Richmond sat at the head of a massive mahogany table, surrounded by 15 board members, 3 lawyers and 2 notaries. In front of him lay the merger documents that would either secure his company's future or destroy everything he had built over the past 20 years. He tried to focus on Benjamin's presentation, but his mind kept drifting back to his conversation with Chloe Parker at the Mountain Diner. Her words echoed in his memory. Promise me you'll really look at them. It's not with your heart, but with your eyes. The financial projections are extremely favorable, Benjamin was saying, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation that showed charts and graphs supporting the Meridian acquisition. Our market analysis indicates that this merger will position Richmond Industries as the dominant force in the tech industry within 18 months. James studied his longtime friend and business partner, applying the observational skills Chloe had urged him to use. For the first time, he noticed things he had previously ignored. The way Benjamin's eyes never quite met his when discussing specific financial details. The slight tension around his mouth when he smiled. The fact that his usually perfect confidence seemed forced rather than natural. The timeline is aggressive, James said carefully, but the opportunity is too good to pass up. Amanda, sitting beside him with her hand resting possessively on his arm, squeezed gently. Darling, this deal will secure our future together.